Welcome back to The Weekend, everyone. We are about to face a very historic moment. A former American president could soon be a convicted criminal. This coming Tuesday, arguments are expected to begin in Donald Trump's 2016 election interference trial. There's been weeks of testimony from former members of Trump's inner circle, including people like Michael Cohen, who faced a grueling cross-examination. But Cohen's former attorney, Lanny Davis, well, he says the real smoking gun in this case isn't from any witnesses. It's actually a document that outlined how the hush money payments were made to Stormy Daniels. And Lanny Davis joins us now. He's the former legal advisor to Michael Cohen and former special counsel to President Bill Clinton. Lanny, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning.
Tell the people about the document. Let's talk about this document, because if folks have not been following the case and everything that has been happening in court, they might be hard-pressed to believe that the crime was written down.
Well, it's a document that's in handwriting and has been admitted into evidence from Allen Weisselberg, the closest person to Donald Trump in the entire Trump organization, who controlled the money. Therefore, Trump was very close to him. He wrote a document out about repaying Michael Cohen for the money that he paid to Stormy Daniels, which was politically motivated, according to Donald Trump's own friends and witnesses, such as David Pecker, which makes it a crime if it was politically motivated to pay hush money. This document shows how the calculation was made to repay Michael Cohen. And in Weisselberg's handwriting, he took $420,000, divided it by 12, and that equaled $35,000, which is the check that he wrote each month to Michael Cohen in 2017 as a sitting president. There's no reference to legal fees. As James Carville would say, it's about the math, stupid. 420 divided by 12 equals $35,000 a month to repay Michael Cohen for what he went to jail for, which is the crime of paying somebody to be quiet for political reasons right before an election. He went to jail for that, and Donald Trump directed him to do that.
So Lenny, let's say that there is a juror who brings this piece of evidence, right, this Weisselberg document, and says, here it is, as you describe it, here is, the smoking gun. And then you have another juror who says, but we don't have direct evidence of Donald Trump's participation in the falsification of those records. What do you then, as the juror who has presented the Weisselberg document, say in response?
Well, there are really two responses. Juries use common sense. This is a document written in handwriting, divides by 12. It's all about math. There's no reference to legal fees. So why would Donald Trump lie and call them legal fees when it's apparent from the document from Weisselberg that it's division by 12, $35,000 a month? As a sitting president, Donald Trump wrote checks to Michael Cohen for $35,000. So a jury will have to say, where is any reference to legal fees? When Donald Trump himself posted a tweet that said reimbursements, that's also part of the evidence. So a common sense juror decision would be they don't have to depend on Michael Cohen. That was my piece in Real Clear Politics. They can look at that document and say there's no reference to legal fees. He lied about legal fees. This is a reimbursement according to his own chief financial officer, and they can conclude beyond a reasonable doubt that this had nothing to do with legal fees. Therefore, the judge will instruct them that if it was a reimbursement for a crime, then he can be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt without depending on Michael Cohen's testimony.
Lanny, it's good to see you again. It's been a long time, friend. I wanted to get your assessment, having been in the courtroom, having counseled Michael Cohen. What was your vibe with the jury? You're familiar with this space, and how do you think his testimony, what Alicia just raised as a potential, obstacle, if you will, for making the case. How do you think the jury's reading this trial and taking in the information as presented? Is it too complicated? Is it pretty straightforward? What's your assessment of what they're hearing and seeing?
Well, first, I wasn't in the courtroom because I was fearful that I would be pointed out and called up to testify, and it turned out they did mention my name, so it was a good decision. Look, this is very simple for a jury to figure out. Everybody who was Trump's witnesses, David Pecker, Hopick, said this, of course, was about campaign related, and that makes it a crime. And the federal prosecutors working for Donald Trump describe this as a serious crime because when you pay for silence, prevent voters from hearing information right before an election, that's a serious crime according to Donald Trump's federal prosecutors who sent Michael Cohen to prison. So here's the vibe, Michael. It's very simple. The Trump, as usual, tried to change the subject and make Michael Cohen the accused. What I wrote is you don't need to believe Michael Cohen. The flat-out evidence is his own witnesses said, of course, it was politically motivated. Answer, that's a crime. Second, did he lie about legal fees? Of course he lied about legal fees. There was no reference to legal fees. It was math by Weisselberg dividing 420 by 12, $35,000 a month, where the checks a sitting president wrote. Ergo, two crimes. That makes, I think, a verdict without relying on Michael Cohen.
You know, Lanny, in the lead up to this trial beginning, and even while it was going on, Donald Trump said that, you know, he would take the stand. He would testify. He said this before in other cases. He did not take the stand in this case. I want to play for you what Donald Trump told WABC Radio about why he decided not to testify.
Because he made rulings that makes it very difficult to testify. Anything I did in the past, they can bring everything up. And you know what? I've had a great past, but anything. But the other thing is, and the main reason, and I don't even mind that. In fact, I like talking about it because we had rigged cases. The other reason is because they have no case. In other words, why testify when they have no case?
I don't know, Lanny. How did you? I mean, we're sitting here as the sound was playing, and it's like Donald Trump saying, "I've had a great past, but you know, all these things I did in the past, crimes maybe." Did he? What is happening here? I don't understand.
Let me talk to all the Trump voters that always watch your program. Do you believe? I know you love Mr. Trump. Do you believe when that he said, I would testify, if he's got a story to tell, why would any of that make sense? Why wouldn't Donald Trump just get up there and stand up the way Michael Cohen did and tell the truth? Do you think it's because his lawyers say, no, we don't trust you to tell the truth? Trump supporters know that Donald Trump promised he would testify and then chickened out. Even they know that. So what he just said makes no sense. I know that's surprising that Donald Trump makes no sense. But it's clearly he was afraid to testify, didn't have the fortitude that Michael Cohen did.
Lenny, if you are watching this jury, then part of what you're going to be watching for in this coming week is sort of any clarifying questions that they ask for, right? It will be our first insight into where there are potential sticky points in their conversations. What are you going to be watching for? What will those questions, should they emerge, indicate to you?
The jury instruction about what is evidence is key. A lot of people think you have to have, as a question was just asked me, direct evidence that Donald Trump paid reimbursements illegally rather than legal fees. But when you look at the document by Alan Weisselberg, it's obvious it had nothing to do with legal fees. So what does the word obvious mean? There's something called circumstantial evidence that the judge will instruct the jury. And here's what I always say for my favorite movie, All the President's Men. If this jury fell asleep at night and there was no snow on the ground and woke up in the morning and saw snow on the ground, that jury could conclude beyond a reasonable doubt that it snowed overnight. That's what they will look at with a document that speaks for itself. Believe your lying eyes. That's the hot document that proves the second crime, which is falsifying, because Donald Trump lied when he said it was legal fees to pay Michael Cohen $35,000 a month for 12 months, when in fact all it was a division of the money that Michael Cohen had advanced and he was repaying. Repayment means it's a crime.
Lanny, how does...
Believe your lying eyes is what the judge will say.
Right. Right. How does other testimony reinforce some central narratives around Trump? For example, you had Hope Hicks echoing Pecker as about Donald Trump being the micromanager. In other words, if the defense is trying to separate Donald Trump out of this, as if, well, I didn't know what was going on, I had no idea this was happening around me. You have testimony that says, well, that can't be right because you are known as a micromanager. You're known as someone, as it says, quote, gets very involved. in the media strategy for the campaign. He knew what he wanted to say, how he wanted to say it. That translates into how Donald Trump also runs his business and how he manages his affairs. How does that fit into sort of rebuffing this narrative of Donald Trump somehow being a victim of Michael Cohen's bad behavior?
The quick answer is believe in the jury system. Most jurors, almost all jurors, are very conscientious. They're respectful of the law. They use their common sense. If a micromanager who's chintzy, who wants to pay 20 cents on the dollar when he owes $1, if that is the testimony that surrounds Donald Trump in the trial, and the jury says, is it conceivable? Is there any reasonable doubt that he would have paid $35,000 a month in personal checks from his personal checking account as a sitting president? Would he do that if he didn't have to avoid the disclosure of this illegal act? Because he knows Michael Cohen went to jail for federal prosecutors working for him for the same crime. So, of course, they will logically say he's not going to write $35,000 equaling $420,000 without having a reason. And Alan Weisselberg said to him in writing, in script, 420 divided by 12, pay Michael Cohen this, no reference to legal fees. Jurors have common sense, and I trust the jury system.
All right, Lanny Davis, really appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Could I take 30 seconds, Michael?
Sure, go ahead.
Michael, could I give a 30-second ending? So Michael Cohen was giving a commencement speech, and I was in the audience, and he said to all the students, and his nephew was in the audience, I want to congratulate you on your graduation. My speech is over, and he sat down. And the kids stood up and gave him a standing ovation. Then he came back and said, I'm only kidding. That's a Michael Steele moment that everyone should know about. Thank you, Mike.
You appreciate it. I appreciate it, Lenny. Thank you so much, my friend.